Dear listener, welcome to my presentation, which is titled What's Knowledge Management Got to Do with It? The Secrets of Industry-Respected Music Business Degrees. My name is Fruzsina Morcz. I'm a third-year PhD student in Budapest. I'm researching different music business courses in the UK, in the United States, and in Germany. And I'm very happy if you have any extra questions apart from this presentation. So I'm going to talk about knowledge management and its relationship with music business degrees. This is a very important topic because when it comes to creative industries and music management courses, we can read several critics of music industry representatives. First, I have to mention that there are three different approaches: the British, the German, and the North American when it comes to music business education. In case of the United Kingdom, there are several courses which are respected, but also some articles where academics see employability as a threat to critical thinking. I recommend you to look into a study published in 2015 written by Toby Bennett, examining the British music business courses. In case of Germany, they have a very long history of vocational education, and you can find the traces of that in their music business courses. There's a research published in 2018 by Ziebenan and Müller about the German courses, and it's quite spectacular how popular and successful these courses are. And in case of the US, what we can see is that employability is a very important asset or characteristic of these courses. Again, there are two different studies worth to look into. I'm going to show you the literature at the end of my presentation, so you can pause my presentation as it is a YouTube video and look into different articles if you are interested. So what sort of aspects have been criticized by music industry representatives? These critics are mainly about British, Canadian, and some other courses such as Australian. One of the aspects that's been criticized is the existence, the usefulness or the content of these courses. And now I'm talking about creative industries and music management courses altogether, as there is no huge amount of literature available about music management courses. These people also criticize the relationship with the labor market when it comes to music management and courses, the employability of graduates, the right balance between theory and practice, and the missing vocational skills of graduates. And there's one important critic which is worth to mention. It's written by David Guile, who works for UCL in London, and he said, or he wrote in 2010, that creative industries or creative and culture related degrees do not really provide skills that students would need, and these courses do not really understand what is required in a vocational context. Therefore, students have a post-graduation vocational need, and they have to acquire the vocational practice, what is a mix of knowledge, skill, and judgment employers are looking for. This is very important and worth to remember when it comes to my presentation. And there are some critics of teachers teaching at these courses. One of the critics mentioned by music industry representatives several times for these studies is these teacher practitioners are either avid amateurs or fallen professionals. It is usually criticized as these people would not be able to work in the industry, couldn't get any job in the industry, or don't really have any professional experience. Another thing that's frequently mentioned by professionals is that there is no theoretical academic view when it comes to industry issues. So there must be a practical view, as people have to come up with solutions. And the third aspect is there is no science behind it. As you can see, this is a quote that someone, a music industry representative, said at Midem, that this is not a real science, but pseudo-intellectual cyber professors. But music business professionals have been criticized as well by academics. One of the things academics and researchers mention quite frequently, that music business professionals have no real knowledge. Their knowledge is unsystemized. It's based on anecdote and example, or instinct, gut feelings, value of good ears and intuition, luck and personality. What is also there is, and is being criticized, is the common sense that these professionals usually rely on. So common sense formulations, habitually, day-to-day industrial dimensions of the industry. But when we talk about the difficulties of music business education, there are 5 different aspects that should be mentioned. First, it's a very practice-based field. Second, there's some kind of a contrast between the knowledge of academics and practitioners. Also, the whole field is characterized by a precarious labor market. It's a quite new field in science, and several or huge amount of non-traditional learners are interested in music management courses, so that gives us an extra challenge when it comes to music management education. Because of the huge amount of people interested in music management, there should be different approaches or concentrations, as Richard Strasser mentioned in 2015. He says that there is a possibility of focusing on 4 different concentrations or aspects of a music business degree. The professional, for people who already work in the industry; the entrepreneurial, for students who would like to build up a product or a band; the research concentration, which is for people who would like to start researching after gaining their degree; and the practical or the practice concentration, which is for people who would like to work for companies within the music industry. So, sorry for asking it here, but we started talking about that already. Is a music business course really essential to get into the music industry? I guess your answer is no. There are several routes into the creative industries sector. One of the routes is the accredited route, based on academic or vocational qualification. The second one is the industry recognized route. It's based on work placement, internships, and master classes. And the third one is the network route, where you build up your network and find a job due to that. So music business course is not essential. Therefore, it should be beneficial for students and provide several advantages for graduates. One of the advantages that someone can have is employability. It's quite important, as you can see from the literature. And there are several elements of employability when it comes to music management courses. First, the knowledge these students possess. Second, the individual factors, the perfect behavior or attitudes one should possess. The third aspect is the human capital, skills, competencies, and work experience. The fourth is the social capital, the network, whether they have any contacts within the industry. And the fifth one is belonging to a community of practice and the trust these students can have, and due to that trust, they can get extra information from the industry. So if we want to talk about employability and expertise, there are not so many literature available about music management, so we have to examine the closest field or the closest discipline to us is the management education. It's quite close. When we talk about management, we have to mention that initially it wasn't a meritocratic field. Inheriting a management role was based on birth or lineage, as there was a belief that skills can be inherited, or ownership and possession, as the other belief belonging here is capital comes with skills. So in case of the history of management education, we can mention two different models. The first model is the Southern model, developed in France. The first French management school was established by a trader and an economist. And it's quite interesting from our perspective, coming from the music management side, that the Chamber of Commerce refused funding or helping this school when it was founded, because they thought that there is no theoretical aspect of business education, so it could not be taught. The second model is a Northern model, established in Germany. And for the German professionals, it was hard to overcome opponents who were convinced that management could only be learned in practice. What was the German response to that? They moved rapidly towards the academization of the field and developed a new science called Science of Business Administration. Two different responses. It's worth to look into the critique of management trainings, as we might recognize some patterns here. First, US business schools were accused of lowering standards of science because of building in management courses. Another aspect that's been criticized is the respect of these courses, whether they are respectful or could be respected. The third aspect is the body of knowledge these courses or this field has. And critics say that there is no real knowledge behind management. The third is the gap between research and practice, as these people claim who are against management education that knowledge delivered by business schools relates poorly to practitioners' needs. It's worth to remember this, as I will be talking about different aspects in case of a different discipline. And the fifth one is the business models aspect, as new business models have never been created in the academy. But why is it? Why it's so controversial? We can find the answers, luckily, at least in case of business management. But first we have to look into a discipline called knowledge management. When we talk about knowledge itself, we can differentiate between four different aspects of knowledge, four different kinds of knowledge, we could say. First, the declarative knowledge, knowing that, factual knowledge. Scientific knowledge, which is about facts and scientific, some sort of a scientific network between facts. It's a distinctive form of codified knowledge. The third one is the procedural knowledge, knowing how to do things. And the fourth one is quite important from our perspective. It's called personal or tacit knowledge. It's based on experience, and due to that experience, one can develop some sort of a professional knowledge base, and that will help that person to have some sort of expertise. The story of knowledge management goes back to the 60s, when a Hungarian scientist called Mihály Polanyi, or Michael Polanyi as he is known in the international literature, wrote two different books, Personal Knowledge and Tacit Dimension. He said that we know more than we can tell, so our knowledge has an aspect, the tacit knowledge, that we cannot really put into words. The existence of tacit knowledge was proved in 1987, and the discipline really started in the 90s by an article and then a book published in 1991 and 1995. What is tacit knowledge? Tacit knowledge is expressed in everyday phrases like professional intuition or common sense. I must ask, does common sense ring a bell here? Did you hear that? Have I already mentioned that? So there are some definitions of tacit knowledge. First, it's embedded in individual experience and involves factors such as personal belief, perspective, and the value system. It's hard to formalize. It also includes subjective insights, intuitions, and also rooted in the individual's action and experience, and full of ideas, values, and emotions. Tacit knowledge has two different dimensions. The first one is the technical dimension. It's some sort of an informal and hard to pin down skills and crafts someone could have. And it's very important that it can be differentiated from the cognitive dimension, which includes or consists mental models, beliefs, and perceptions. Both of these dimensions, or sort of tacit knowledge, are hard to be articulated. How important tacit knowledge is? As we can see from the literature, for example, this is a quote from Hedlund, much of the knowledge associated with successful performance is tacit. Approximately 75% of the factors that count for successful performance cannot be measured by standard intelligence tests because these factors are tacit. If you think back of the critics' knowledge about the knowledge music professionals have, intuition, anecdote, example, gut feelings, personality, beliefs, common sense. Yes, we could find something here. And now we have to talk about Robert Sternberg, but not from his love theory that most of you might know, but from the practical intelligence and expertise aspect. Sternberg and his colleagues started examining and analyzing and developing the idea of practical intelligence sometime in the middle of the 80s. And his colleagues' theory is based on tacit knowledge. It's linked to practical intelligence and expertise. What Sternberg says is that tacit knowledge is part of the practical intelligence, whether we can decide and solve problems is mainly influenced by the level of tacit knowledge one has. And the level of tacit knowledge correlates with expertise. So tacit knowledge is an enabler of practical intelligence behavior. It's a critical aspect of expertise. So the more the tacit knowledge one has, the more expertise or expert they can become. You can see it from another study that in case of, for example, shooters, there is some sort of a development linked to the difference between explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge, how someone can develop. And it also happens on levels too. So you can see that, for example, in case of a music business graduate, students can understand and remember facts and know about the industry, understand the context, but they have more explicit knowledge. The more tacit knowledge they gain through practice or in practice, the more they will be able to apply their knowledge, analyze, evaluate, and then create new solutions. If we think back of the critic of creative industries courses, David Guile said that what employers need is a mix of knowledge, skill, and judgment. And we could see that it's very close to, or is another definition of, tacit knowledge. So once again, it's worth to look into this triangle. You can see that the development happens as someone gains tacit knowledge. And just one more thing, there are three different ways knowledge is generated. The first one is the mode 1 type of knowledge, or the way someone could have or generate knowledge. It's characterized by theory building or testing within a discipline. It's academic, investor initiated, and discipline-based kind of knowledge production. The second one is characterized by knowledge produced by and for application. It's typically generated among practitioners as a result of on-the-job learning through reflection. And it's generated in the context of application. And this is not really related to one-on-one disciplines, but it is transdisciplinary. We can also think of tacit knowledge here. The third way is the mode 3, where there is some sort of coexistence and co-development when it comes to generating knowledge. There are different levels: individual, structural, organizational, and systemic, how this knowledge is generated or where this knowledge is generated. And here we have to mention knowledge clusters, innovation network, universities, academics, and we could also say communities of practice. 3 different models, and if you think of that, you could find which comes with the knowledge of academics, the knowledge of practitioners, the knowledge community of practice, or the industry representatives altogether have. If we think back once again of the critics about the knowledge music professionals have, we can also think of these different models and why these parties do not really understand each other. So how music management education is connected? Tacit knowledge has been analyzed and examined in management. What we know about tacit knowledge in case of management, the amount of tacit knowledge one owns is correlated with managerial success, position within a company, and expertise. We also know that tacit knowledge can help us to understand why some managers end up being much more successful than others. Tacit knowledge is a knowledge that reflects the practical ability to learn from experience and to apply that knowledge in pursuit of personally valued goals. So where is the solution? There are 2 different parties generating knowledge in different ways, with different values. What we can do here is look into medical training, because they have that. Medical training is quite respected by practitioners and researchers as well. But it wasn't like that about 200 years ago. Until the late 19th century, the application of scientific knowledge to medicine spawned quakery as often as genuine medical progress. Until there was no convincing evidence that a physician trained in science had better results, people were not so keen to do medical training. And medical science had not yet as become translated into convincing practical results, was not so influential. There was also a belief when medical training was launched, and until the 19th century, I would say, that knowing how or being a practitioner doesn't really need any kind of theoretical knowledge or theoretical training or medical training at all. And there were some reforms in medical education and training at the end of the 19th century, when people started to believe or increase their faith in science, and the whole medical education was changed and straightened the scientific elements in the knowledge base provided for medical students, but it was combined with hands-on clinical experience. The thing that made people believe and change their minds that medical education is essential and important was that facts could be shown that such reliance would lead to a better patient care. The knowledge base is basically and essentially influenced by the initial training these professionals have. And nowadays we still have two different routes in medical education. One is the physician's and the other is the surgeon's route. And the former is more based in higher education and science and codified knowledge or theoretical knowledge. And another one, the surgeon's route, is more based on practice, tacit knowledge, and in case of medical education, the barber surgeon's tradition. Today, both types of doctors have a strong academic element to the knowledge base they use, and more experts are taking place or participating in research. In case of medical practitioners, learning to be an effective practitioner is learning to do something. Learning, in case of medical trainings, is always situated because they do have to learn the tacit part of the profession. Clinical judgment, they think, cannot be taught but only acquired through experience. And it must be linked to participation in the community of practice. You can think of doctors starting their practice in hospitals and learning beside a professional who is also a professor, a teacher. It's quite important that after all these changes, research nowadays in medical trainings or in medicine itself is carried out by practicing doctors, and the research agenda is heavily influenced by frontline practitioner concerns. The overlap between hospital practitioners and researchers socializes young doctors to attitudes and practices that are very different from those in education, any kind of education. This article that I'm citing here is written by David Hargraves, who was a very influential educational researcher, and he is comparing the medical education to teacher training or any kind of training where this practice is very different from the medical training. So if we think about music management education here, and we compare that to medical trainings, we have to think of the teacher practitioner aspect, tacit knowledge, professional judgment, expertise, community practice, and research and practice gap. All the issues we have. What sort of responses does medical education have? If we think about medical education generally, we can also think of different methods used in medical education, such as situated learning, learning by doing, problem-based learning, communities of practice, apprenticeship. These are all linked to gaining tacit knowledge. This is why, for example, they have two different kinds of apprenticeship. One is more based on examining and passively watching, and another is taking greater responsibility and participating. So this is all for now about medical education. I promise that I'm going to write a chapter about that in my PhD dissertation. Now we can have some questions. For example, which kind of knowledge is more valuable from an industry perspective, the common sense or the scientific knowledge? Is one type of knowledge more valuable than the other? If you think about medical education, what do you say? Can the difference between academics and professionals explained based on knowledge management? What can a successful and two-way supportive cooperation music business professionals and academics give to the industry? What more can implementing Mode 2 and tacit knowledge give students and music management courses? How can music management representatives start to respect music business degrees? These are questions I leave you with. This is all for today. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to show you the literature now. And if you are interested, please pause my video and look into the titles. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your patience. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Please get in touch. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Bye-bye.